Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now we formally begin our webinar. My name is Imran Sardar. I'm a research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies, and I'm moderating this session today on a very important subject, that is Iran's Middle Eastern relationships, especially Iran's relationship with Hezbollah and Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Palestine, Islamic Jihad in Palestine, and Fatimiyun in Afghanistan. Iran has been maintaining its really strong relationship with those groups, for which Iran has faced many criticism from the host countries as well. So what is the nature of its relationship with those groups, and what challenges the Iran is facing, and what will be the future dynamics of its relationship with those groups? To discuss these aspects, we have two very important, very prominent speaker with us. The one is Debbie Mohnblatt. Am I pronouncing correctly your name? Okay. And the second speaker is Silvia Boltuc. I welcome you all to this very important webinar. I will start with Debbie Mohnblatt. She is a Middle East correspondent for the Media Alliance News Agency and the host of the podcast Media Oriente 123, the first news program that about the region in Spanish. She holds the degree in History of Middle Eastern politics and in journalism, and she will be discussing the Troika, the Iran non-state actors and their host countries' relationship. So over to you, Debbie.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to share the stage with Silvia. I have worked with her, and I'm really happy that I'm here with you. So I will share my screen for a moment. Okay. So as I said, very nice to meet you. I'm really happy to be here. So to talk about Iran's proxies, I think it's really important to first focus on the roots, on the reason why Iran has proxy groups. And the roots is the Iranian Revolution in 1979, which was a general uprising in the Iranian population against the Reza Shah Pahlavi, which was the king of Iran at the moment. It's important to say that this revolution was confirmed by many different groups in the population, but at the end of the day, when the Shah was overthrown, the one who took power is Ayatollah Khomeini, who is a man that was he was in exile during the times of the Shah because he was a really strong political opponent. And while he was in exile, he wrote a lot of books. One of them is called The Islamic Government, and he really explains why should Iran have a Muslim fundamentalist Shiite government, and why all the policies of the Shah, who was very westernized and very modernized, are wrong. And at the end of the day, when the Shah was ousted, so Ayatollah Khomeini came back from exile and took power. But it's really important to understand that the Iranian Revolution, not all of the people that participated in the Iranian Revolution were followers of Ayatollah Khomeini, but when the Shah was ousted, he was the one who took power. Now, it's really important that he took power because if we go back to the beginning of Islam, when there was the division between the Shiite and the Sunni, they were always rivals through history. And until the Islamic Republic was born in 1979, it was a long time before there were no Shiite rulers, no such important Shiite rulers. So the Islamic Republic was let's say the source of hope for the Shiite world, because it was the first Shiite republic, strong republic. Iran is a country of 80 million people. And so it's the first strong Shiite country that was born in the modern world. So Iran, the Islamic Republic, thought that its ideology was so important that it needed to be exported as well, that it didn't need to be limited to the borders of the country. So that is why the Islamic Republic decided to start exporting its ideology. Now, if we look here, we see a map of Iran and part of the Middle East and most of the countries where it has proxy groups. Now, it's important to understand that most of these countries have Shiite populations that either are a minority or are not in power. And so we have to understand the context in each and every one of these countries to understand why does Iran has a proxy group there. And that is why we're going to go one by one and understand them quickly. We're gonna go through them. So I guess that for all of you, the first proxy group that pops into your mind when you say Iranian proxy groups is Hezbollah, the Party of God, who resides in Lebanon. It was founded in 1988, between 1988 and 1985, a few years after the Iranian Revolution and the founding of the Islamic Republic. And what is important is to understand the context of Lebanon at that moment. Lebanon was going through a really, really hard civil war. And in Lebanon, we should note that we don't have one religious majority. We have three religious majorities. The population is composed mostly by Muslim Shiite, Muslim Sunni, and Christian, and there's a small portion of Druze. Now, at the moment, they were fighting almost everyone against everyone, and the Shiite population was the least strong. And they had a few militias, but later Iran sent officials to train these militias and to unify them into an organization that was called Hezbollah. And since then, it started to be what we call an Iranian proxy. Now, we can read here a quote of Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in 2016, where he really says that Hezbollah's budget comes from Iran. Now, Hezbollah is a very complicated organization because it's multifaceted. First of all, is the non-state actor with the most weapons in the world, the most heavily armed non-state actor in the world. And this is really important to understand because it means that an Iranian proxy is the world's largest non-state actor who is armed. Now, it's also, Hezbollah is also multifaceted, which means that it has a political wing, which has been in the parliament of Lebanon since 1992. And it has it does social work, and it does religious work, and it does many kinds of different activities. Now, in terms of its funding, the State Department of the United States estimated that around $7 million are transmitted from Iran to Hezbollah every year. And besides that, Hezbollah has also independent income, and it comes from its illegal activities, mostly in South America. Hezbollah is really involved in the drug trafficking in South America, and that is one way that they fund themselves. So moving on from Hezbollah, let's go to the Popular Mobilization Forces, which is important for me to say that this directly is not an Iranian proxy, but it is an umbrella organization for many militias, which are mostly Shia, and the Iranian proxies are part of these militias, okay? Not everyone in the Popular Mobilization Forces are Shia, and this is important to understand, and not everyone are Iranian proxies, but the Iranian proxies in Iraq, which is the country that has the most Iranian proxies in the world, are part of these Popular Mobilization Forces. So what is the PMF? It's an organization, an umbrella organization that was created by Ali al-Sistani, who was the biggest Shia cleric in 2014, who called upon people because ISIS was taking power in Iraq. And so this umbrella organization was created to fight ISIS. Now that we understand this, let's go one by one of the most important Iranian proxies in Iraq. So the first, we have Kataib Hezbollah, which is the Party of God Brigades. And what is important to say here, it was founded in 2007, and it joined the PMF in 2014 to fight ISIS, but it also fought American targets in Iraq. And what is important to say, which really proves that they had a contact of a really high level with Iran, is that Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, who was its leader, was killed with Qasem Soleimani in the American target in January 2020. So this is really important because Qasem Soleimani was the commander of Al-Quds forces, which is the division within the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps that is in charge of communicating with all the foreign organizations, which is the proxy groups. So they were in a meeting in a car, and the bomb exploded of them, killing both of them. Now, we also have Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, which is the movement of the Party of God's Nobles, which was also founded and trained and provided weapons by Iran. We have also the Badr organization, which is the oldest and also the most powerful Iranian proxy in Iraq. It was founded in 1982, the same year as Hezbollah. And today it has joined the PMF. Now we gotta move all the way to Yemen, and we have to talk about Ansar Allah, or also known as the Houthis. This is an organization born in the 90s and is also conformed from part of the Shiite population in Yemen, which is now in a civil war since 2014 because the Houthis took the capital Sana'a in 2014 and ousted President Hadi, who is now backed by a Saudi coalition, and the Houthis are backed by Iran. And this high-level involvement of foreign countries in the Yemeni war has turned the Yemeni war to be one of the most serious humanitarian crises in our modern history. So there was a truce in 2022. There was a truce in Yemen that lasted about 6 months. It was UN brokered. And at the end of the day, they failed to renew it once more in October. And since then, the war has continued. If we move all the way to Syria, there are two groups that were actually exported to Syria. These two groups were conformed of Pakistani and Afghan refugees that were sitting in Iran at the moment when the war in Syria broke in 2011. And during the war, these militias were formed in Iran and exported to Syria. They were deployed to Syria to help President Bashar al-Assad. Why is important for Iran? Because Syria is a Sunni majority country, but Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite, which is part of the Shia current. And it's good for Iran that he stays in power so that they have a certain level of control over the country. They can transport things that they want all the way to Lebanon, to Hezbollah, through Syria. They use it a lot as a corridor, and they have a lot of interests in Syria. That is why they created these two militias and just deployed them to help Bashar al-Assad against the rebels in the Syrian civil war. Now, if we go to the Palestinian territories, we have Hamas as the first group, but this is a whole different story because the Palestinians are under totality Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims, sorry. So in this time, the religious factor is not what unifies them. The current of the religion is not what unifies them, but it's a common enemy, which is the state of Israel. Here we can read, for example, a quote of a Sinwar, which is a senior Hamas military leader, who says, relations with Iran are excellent, and Iran is the largest supporter of Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas, with money and arms, which means that this makes Hamas an Iranian proxy, but it is not only subject to Hamas, to Iranian orders, and it's important to understand that. But the State Department of the United States also estimated that between the two groups, the two Palestinian groups that receive money from Iran, they receive about $100 million every year. The relations between Iran and Hamas deteriorated in 2014 because they asked Hamas to go to the Syrian civil war and also help Bashar al-Assad, but Hamas refused to do so, so they cut the funding, but it was resumed in 2017. And last year, Hamas also increased its relations with the Syrian government once again. Now, the other Palestinian group is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which was founded in 1981, and it also receives funding and weapons from Iran, many times orders as well. If we go to Bahrain, I'm sorry that the presentation is distorted a little bit, but here we can see two different militias. Bahrain is a really, really small country, and it has a Shiite minority, is Sunni majority, and is governed by the Sunni. And it also has two militias that have tried to overthrow the government, the dynasty. Now, I think it's really important to understand the bigger context of why does Iran has proxy groups, and is what many people call the Cold War in the Middle East. Well, Iran is seen as the leader of the Sunni world, of the Shiite world, and Saudi Arabia is seen as its big opponent, which is seen as the leader of the Sunni world. Now, it's important to understand that there's another bloc that is more fundamentalist, more Islamist, and is part of the Sunni bloc, but is kind of a different bloc, and is composed by Turkey and Qatar, but we're not, and they support the Muslim Brotherhood and other groups, but we're not gonna talk about them right now. I just wanted to clarify that they exist, but the big Cold War, if you want to call it like that, is between these two countries. And if you let me go back to the slide, slide of the maps, I can show you that for Iran, it's really important to have these proxy groups because it gives them virtual borders with all its enemies. So, for example, the proxy groups in the Palestinian territories in Lebanon and in Syria give them a virtual border with Israel. For example, many times Iran sends weapons to Hezbollah all the way through Iraq, then Syria, and then Hezbollah receives them. And this is possible thanks to their proxies in these territories. They call this a corridor. And they also can reach the Mediterranean Sea, which is really important. And with their proxies in Iraq, in Bahrain, and in Yemen, they have direct contact with Saudi Arabia, which is another one of Iran's enemies. So for Iran, it's really important to have these proxies, and it also allows Iran to do actions that it doesn't want to be taken accountable for, which is also very important on this matter. I guess my time, I have run out of time, but I hope you enjoyed it and it was clear. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for highlighting the historical accounts of Iran's relationship with its proxies. And you rightly pointed out that relationship with those proxy groups is important for Iran because it's a gateway, or it's a virtual border with the enemies. So what is the nature of the existing relationship? I will ask later in the question and answer session. Now I move towards the next speaker, and the next speaker is Silvia Boltuc, and she is an international affairs specialist, business consultant, and political analyst who has supported private and public institution in decision making by providing reports, risk assessment, and consultancy. She is also the director of energy and engineering department of CESEM and an editor analyst at various Italian media agencies. Currently, she is heading the Special Eurasia, a geopolitical consultancy firm, as managing director. So over to you, Silvia.
Yes, thank you. Just 1 second. I'm trying to share my desktop. Oh, now it's working. Can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Just 1 second. I have to switch off my camera because internet connection is not working very well. I'm sorry, maybe now. Okay, now it's working for me. Okay. I am gonna talk about the Iranian proxies in the Middle East. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the second largest country in the Middle East by size after Saudi Arabia. It is located at a very strategic crossroad in the Middle East. This is why the country is trying to become a hub for trade and energy. As my prominent colleague told before, Shia Islam is the state religion, and we will see by presenting some proxies how Shiism is the common ground which brings together these groups, the proxies. Of course, not the only one, but it is remarkable, I think, for example, the great importance they give to martyrdom, recalling Shia history, as all of Shiite imams were killed by their enemies. One of the most important example, of course, in the contemporary time is the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Furthermore, according to several Middle Eastern experts, while in the first decade following the Islamic Revolution, Iran was pretty much concentrated in exporting the ideology of its revolution in other countries, starting from the end of the 80s, Tehran was more concerned with protecting the new government system and ensuring the country from foreign threats. Of course, one of the most significant experience of the Islamic Republic was the Iran-Iraq war, which hit the country in its more delicate moment. I think it is important also to underline our role as Western world, as basically we all aligned with Iraq during the invasion, while Iran has only Syria on its side. And this contributed to the Iranian perception of Western countries to be a threat for the Islamic Republic. As I will underline in my presentation, this event was also a turning point for Iranian entities such as the Revolutionary Guard, Corps, Quds Force, Basij, and other entities. The second event, which harshly influenced the Iranian militias, was the rise of ISIS. As for the Western world, since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iran has presented a major foreign policy challenge for the United States. US administration have identified Iran and its activity as a threat to the United States and its interests in the region. Of particular concern, as we can see already today, are Iran's nuclear program and its support for numerous armed groups throughout the region. In addition, Iran maintains what US officials describe as the largest inventory of ballistic missiles in the region and an arsenal of unmanned aerial vehicles. Before talking about the group itself, I would like to highlight that jihad, the holy war, in Shia has a specific condition. We have the preliminary jihad, which was for the expansion of Islam to other regions in the early century of Islam. Such act is rejected in occultation of Imam Mahdi, and there is the defensive jihad, which is permitted to prevent enemies to attack the state, and we are referring to the Shia state, so not to the Muslim Ummah, and is permitted in occultation period. So let's move forward. I will talk briefly about Hezbollah. Hezbollah, the Party of God, is an Iranian-based Lebanese Shia militia and a US-designed foreign terrorist organization. Hezbollah, as my colleague told before, is the world's most heavily armed non-state actor. Was founded in the cause of the 15-year Lebanon civil war, which broke out in 1975, pushed by internal discontent over the large armed Palestinian presence in the country. The Sunni Muslim population have grown with the arrival of Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, while Shiite Muslim felt increasingly marginalized by the ruling Christian minority. Amid the domestic crisis, Israeli forces invaded Lebanon. Hezbollah builds itself as a Shiite resistance movement. This is very important, and declared its ideology in a 1985 manifesto that vowed to expel Western powers from Lebanon, called for the destruction of the Israeli state, and pledged alliance to Iran's supreme leader. Moreover, it also advocated an Iran-inspired Islamist regime, but emphasized that the Lebanese people must have the freedom of self-determination. The interesting thing about Hezbollah, as my colleague told before, is that it is both a Shiite Muslim political party and a militant group. Moreover, its extensive security apparatus, political organization, social services network foster its reputation as a state within a state. The Iran-based group, as we have already underlined, is driven by its opposition to Israel and its resistance to Western influence in the Middle East. In December 2018, for example, Israel announced the discovery of miles of tunnels running from Lebanon into northern Israel that it claims were created by Hezbollah. According to 2022 Europol report, Hezbollah built a network of collaborators also in the EU, which help trafficking drugs and running money laundering operation. Of course, as my colleague already underlined, they have also some kind of legal business which bring money and fundings to the organization. They have also the power, of course, to influence Lebanese politics, although during recent elections, it appears to have lost a little bit of its grip on the population. Nevertheless, Hezbollah has participated in elections since 1992 and draws popular support mostly from its vast network and social services. As for the structure of the organization, Hassan Nasrallah has served as the Secretary General of Hezbollah since the assassination of his predecessor by the Israeli Defense Forces in 1992. It has also, as I told before, a military wing. As for the planning, coordination, and execution of attack, we have the military arm of Hezbollah called the External Security Organization. It is also known as the Islamic Jihad Organization, or Unit 910. I think it is vital to underline that Hezbollah took part in the Syrian civil war, supporting Bashar al-Assad, because its involvement in the civil war gave the militia really the opportunity to transform itself into an increasingly effective militia forces. In fact, we see that Hezbollah is also training other Iranian-backed militias in other parts of the Middle East. According to the US State Department, Iran provides most of Hezbollah weapons and foundings. Israel has also stated that Iran may be supplying Hezbollah with advanced weapon system and technology and assisting Hezbollah in creating an indigenous production capabilities. This is also something very important about that. What I think is also important to underline is that Iran and its Islamic Revolution Guard Corps provide not only funds but also training to the militias, while Hezbollah also provide weapons and training to Houthi militias, for example, in Yemen, in Syria. This is a critical aspect of the Iranian proxies, that they bridge themselves and cooperate. Okay, we have the Houthis. Yemen Houthis are part of the Iranian-led informal alliance known as the Axis of Resistance in the Middle East. They are officially called Ansar Allah, the Partisans of God. The Houthis traced their roots to a Zaidi Shia revivalist movement in northern Yemen that militarized in the 2000s and held legitimate grievance of political and socioeconomic marginalization against the Yemeni government. They have preserved their autonomy. This is also very important, while integrating into Iran's network of state and non-state actors opposed to Western influence in the Middle East. Houthi leaders uphold Iran's Islamic revolution as a model. The Houthi ideology finds overlap in the Islamic revolution through the Zaidi concept of Huruj, the duty to rebel against an unjust ruler, which justified the Houthis' armed rebellion against the Yemeni government. For Iran, this group initially presented an opportunity to threaten Saudi Arabia's southern border and later to expand Iranian influence in the Red Sea. We can say that Tehran began courting the Houthis in earnest as they navigated political turmoil during 2011 Arab Springs unrest, broadening its support to the Houthis beyond the military domain. Tehran's effort to cultivate the Houthis accelerated after they decided Sana'a, the Yemeni's capital, in September 2014. Senior IRGC Quds Force and Hezbollah officials coordinate support to the Houthis groups. And they have also a network. Iran has a network with these groups, which provide, again, financial support and fuel transfer. Notably, Iranian source capabilities transferred to the rebel group have expanded the conflict beyond Yemen's borders. This is very important to be underlined. The Yemeni conflict has provided Tehran with a live fire testing ground for longer range capabilities. This is, I think, the really dangerous thing about that. So this is important, although Iran has provided military assistance to its Iraqi proxies for longer time, it has transferred more advanced weapons to the Houthis. So this is a very special relation. And now they are threatening, of course, the security of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The attack against Saudi Arabia increased notably in 2021 using ballistic missiles and WAFs to target primarily Saudi oil infrastructure, civilian airport, and military installation. Another important aspect that is perceived as a very important threat in the region is that Iranian source weapons within the Houthi arsenal can reach Israel. And this is a risk that, of course, the United States and Israel are considering, and the risk of an IRGC coordinated multi-actor attack on Israel. And of course, the problem is also from Iranian perspective, as on the other side, it is fair to underline that there is a risk also of a US-Israel coordinated attack towards Iran, given the currently situation. As for the US countermeasure, we can notice that the IRGC Quds forces transferring increasingly sophisticated weapons and capabilities to the Houthis during the Trump administration maximum pressure campaign against Iran. So this means that the threat of US sanction was insufficient to deter the deepening of the ties between the two countries. We should also underline, of course, remember that the United States might also sustain counter-terrorist pressure on Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So by saying that the US campaign to reduce the Houthis' power in Yemen hasn't been completely effective, we should also say that the task is quite difficult given the challenging environments. These are some of the Iraqi militia. I didn't mention every single one. I just give some brief example. Iraq hosted Ayatollah Khomeini during its exile, and as a Shiite majority, the war in Iraq has produced an unintended consequence, a Shia Muslim geographical bloc in the Middle East. And although as I already underlined, it was unintended, the United States supplied the key linkage for this bloc by overthrowing Saddam Hussein. Iran-based militia forces in Iraq seek to rescind Iraq's invitation to the US military to retain an advisory presence in Iraq beyond the withdrawal of US combat forces from the country in December 2021. They seek revenge for the January 2020 US strike in Baghdad that killed IRGC Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani and the head of the Iranian-backed Iraqi militia Kataib Hezbollah. Moreover, as the recent protests underline, Iran has a difficult relation with the Kurdish minority inside the country, and their claims, and Tehran also carried out strikes in the Iraqi Kurdistan region, targeted what the Islamic Republic considers support network for Israel and Iraq-based Iranian Kurdish opposition group. This is also very important. As for Iran, the Iraqi Kurdistan is cooperating with Israel to counter Tehran. We should add that while Khomeini spent part of its exile in Iraq, and on the other hand, several politicians and militias leaders from Iraq spent years in exile in Tehran during Saddam Hussein's reign. They have gone even further. One of Iraq's most powerful armed group, the Badr organization, was formed in 1982 by Iraq exiles to fight Saddam Hussein with the support of Iran. An interesting fact regarding Iraq's Shia group was how the rise of ISIS prepared the ground for their institutionalization. Indeed, in Iraq, we have the formal Iraqi armed forces, and then in addition, there are the Popular Mobilization Forces, militias, and the Kurdish Peshmerga. What happened was that after the rise of ISIS in 2014 and the collapse of the Iraqi army, Iraq's top Shiite cleric, Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, issues a religious decree, a fatwa, a call to arms. More than 6 armed groups eventually merged under the umbrella of the Popular Mobilization Forces, reaching in 2015 some 60,000 fighters, and were legalized in 2016 by the Iraqi parliament. This is also very important and also controversial, if I may add. They are not all necessarily loyal to Iran. Some of them are loyal to the supreme leader, some to Muqtada al-Sadr, some to the Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani. I will not spend time to talk about the other group because my prominent colleague did it perfectly. I will talk about the Revolutionary Guard and Quds forces, although they are not we cannot really consider them as proxy, as they are part of the Iranian institution, but they work also outside the country's borders. Following the return of Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran in 1979, one of the first strategic moves of the Shia clergy was to create the Islamic military body that will be autonomous and separate from the national army, Artesh. Of course, this was not a coincidence. Khomeini precisely created the Revolutionary Guard Corps to control the army and to prevent any possible coup against the newly established Islamic regime. The young Iranians who joined the Pasdaran were mostly Islamic traditionalists, often belonging to unprivileged social groups. Although the Artesh has a larger number of permanent staff than the Pasdaran, about 350,000 compared with about 150,000 of the Pasdaran, it does not receive the largest allocation of funds, which goes to the Pasdaran. The Pasdaran underwent a significant transformation and acquired a formal structure, turning into a truly autonomous military force, providing support to national troops against the Iraqi forces during the Iran-Iraq war again. The war was an important training ground for the Pasdaran. Then in the following years, they penetrated the country's political economic sphere. They have the Pasdaran have a special unit for extraterritorial operation known as the Quds Force. The Quds Force was created during the war again and was in charge of military intelligence activities and undercover investigation on Iraq territories. After the rise of the Islamic State in the Middle East, Quds Force expanded and became one of the most crucial military forces active in the region involved in countering ISIS influence. Then we have, which has become quite famous recently due to the process, we have the paramilitary body of the Basij. They was founded during the first month after the revolution through Ayatollah Khomeini direct order. Khomeini's purpose was to engage the lower middle classes in the activities of the new Islamic Republic. So he asked the nation to arm itself. As in the previous two cases, the war with Iraq changed also these militias. The Basij enlisted hundreds of thousands of zealous young recruits. We are talking about very, very young people, starting from around 13 years. And they now are part of the morality police, which is quite controversial and very discussed right now. So just briefly, I think I'm running out of time. I add this group as they are Pakistani Shia, and today we are talking at a conference in Islamabad. This is a pro-government militia fighting in Syria. It is composed of Pakistani Shia, mainly recruited in Iran, and in a region located in the northwestern region of Pakistan. It operates primarily in Damascus, and its official purpose is to defend the Sayyida Zainab Mosque, the shrine of Zainab bint Ali, sister of Imam Hussein and granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad, and other Shia holy site in Syria. Indeed, the Pakistani Shia militia who previously acted individually were organized under the name Zainabiyun Brigade in 2014, following a missile attack by the Salafi militias on the shrine of Sayyida Zainab in Damascus in 2012. An interesting aspect about this group is that although they are mainly Pakistani, when they die, they are buried mainly in Iran, some of them in Qom. Of course, this group highlights the sectarian division in part of the region of the Pakistani society. The month of Muharram, the first month of the Islamic lunar calendar, is always a delicate moment for the Sunni-Shia relation inside Pakistan. And I think it is fair to say in conclusion that this movement are the consequences of this exportation of the Islamic revolution ideology after 1979. Just to briefly recall them, in Syria we can also find the Fatemiyun Brigade, which is reputed to have a large number of fighters recruited among Afghan Shia. So just to close, to have an idea what is the Western world doing about these proxies, US policy towards Iran includes extensive sanctions, providing aid and authorizing arms sales to partners seeking to influence negotiation over Iran's nuclear program. The Department of Defense, which was formally established United States Central Command, CENTCOM, in 1983. CENTCOM has command authority over US forces in the Middle East. The Biden administration, similar to the previous one of Trump and Obama, wants to economize US force deployment to the CENTCOM area of responsibility where possible. So we saw the withdrawal of group by many parts of the region. But although we saw this retirement of troops and the shift towards the Indo-Pacific, in November 2022, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Colin Cole said the United States remain committed to the region. We are here and we are not going anywhere. So to show that the Middle East still remain a fundamental region for our foreign policy. As for Iran, the United States has been engaged in a hybrid conflict with Iran for decades. CENTCOM, according to March 2022 testimony from then CENTCOM Commander General McKenzie, current CENTCOM planning is based on clear and unambiguous signaling to Iran and its threat network. The last important point is the critical move of Israel, which was shifted from EUCOM, so the European Command, to CENTCOM. In so doing, the defense of the Department of Defense of the United States noted the easing of tension between Iran and its Arab neighbors subsequent to the Arab Accords has provided a strategic opportunity for the United States to align key partners against shared threats in the Middle East. Of course, they were referring also to Iran, although they didn't mention it. They have some patrolling mission inside the Strait of Hormuz. They support the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, and most important, they have the Juniper Oak 23 exercise, the largest US-Israel exercise in history. which was held in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea region, and to improve interoperability between US and Israel. International media agencies suggested that they are preparing a possible attack on Iran. It is not a secret, although we cannot be sure about that, it is not a secret that they are seeking a regime change inside the country. So thank you for your attention. I'm sorry if I took a little bit longer the stage. The last thing I want to add, because it's very important, of course, as you may have noticed, in my research in this presentation, I relied only on Western sources, so US and European sources. It is not a secret that the position of the Western world towards Iran and Iranian proxies is very negative. I think to have a balanced analysis, but I didn't have the time today, but it will be at least fair to take into account also the Iranian position and narrative.
Thank you. Thank you, Silvia. Thank you very much. I think you did justice with your subject. So
thank you.
It was really interesting presentation. I will just, the floor is open for the question and answer session now. I just wanted to ask a very simple question from both the panelists, that don't you think that the idea of exporting the Shia ideology in the beginning was by choice? And with the passage of time, relationship with the so-called proxies groups has become right now a compulsion for Iran. And more importantly, it has become a liability, since Iran is under sanction for quite very long time. So what do you think?
Is the question for me or for?
I request both panelists to please respond on this question.
Okay. Okay.
So,
yeah.
Silvia, your mic is on, so you please respond first if you like.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I think that there was a shift in the foreign policy of Iran. At the very beginning, they were quite interested in exporting the ideology of the revolution. And we already experience also today that Iran is trying to influence using the Shia ideology also other countries. We can see, for example, the friction between Iran and Azerbaijan, where Azerbaijan is trying to influence the Azeri minorities inside Iran, and Iran is using the religion to influence the Azerbaijan country. But on the other side, many experts think that after the, I would say, the first decade after the revolution, Iran start being more concerned about the domestic security and the security of this kind of political system. They realize, particularly, of course, after the invasion from Iraq, that the foreign actors, were a threat for the Islamic Republic as a political system and as a new established reality. So they try. My opinion is that they created a sort of Shia buffer zone. They use the ideology, but not only the religion, to create this kind of buffer zone to protect the borders and, of course, empower themselves and prepare to what I think they believe it's inevitable. So a clash with the enemies, which might be the US, Israel, or the entire Western Bloc.
So Debbie, if you like to respond.
Yes, what Silvia said is very true. At the beginning, it was really important for them to really export the ideology, and it was a heavily ideologically charged mission for them. But as the time passed, since the Islamic Republic was born, they faced a lot of geopolitical problems that made them address these problems. And a way to address them was through their proxies, thousands of kilometers away from their borders. So in a way, it is a method that the Islamic Republic uses to defend its borders by addressing what it sees as its threats thousands of kilometers away or hundreds of kilometers away. But the proxies serve as the long distance guards of the Islamic Republic. So yeah, at the beginning it was only ideology and about influence, and then lately it became really an Iranian interest to have these groups in order to defend itself and its government.
Thank you. I have one more question in the chat panel. That is, this question is from Irta Fatma, who is an intern at IRS. So how we see the Saudi-Lebanese ties to create instability in Iran, and how it is funded Hezbollah agenda? Your comments. Yes, you please.
Okay. Okay, so first, yeah, it is really important. And the Saudis became really involved in Iran during the civil war, and they started to bring a lot of influence to the country as they sent a commission to be peace breakers. And they were the ones who at the beginning were the most influential in the Taif Accord, which is the accord that finished with the Lebanese civil war. And Iran saw that its ideological enemy, if you can call it like that, was starting to gain a lot of influence in a country that had a lot of potential for Iran. So Iran got involved more and invested a lot more in Hezbollah, and it achieved that in the Taif agreement, Hezbollah was the only militia that was involved in the civil war that stayed armed after the Taif agreement. And this is thanks to Iranian involvement, that it was boosted by the competition that was formed with Saudi Arabia, that came to have a lot of influence in Lebanon as well. Lebanon is a really strategic point, and it has a lot of potential for both these powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia. It has access to the Mediterranean Sea, which none of them has. And it has a divided population, which makes it a very heavily charged sectarian antagonism in many cases, which is a lot of potential to introduce your influence. So as the Saudi influence grew, the Iranian influence grew as well, and it was reflected through what Hezbollah is today.
So Silvia, please, if you want to respond.
Yes. I think there are 2 points to consider. First of all, although of course Saudi Arabia is seeking a regime change inside Iran, I don't think that they want to be directly involved in a confrontation. We saw this recently, I think this week, 2 days ago, maybe, that they just announced another round of talk between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're trying in some way to settle the dispute. On the other side, there is some kind of unconventional warfare, and information warfare, I would say. Unless, confronting from a military point of view, they are conducting a war on the information, on the media agency. We have seen that during the ongoing protests in Iran, Saudi Arabia founded some media agency also in Europe, to trying to give visibility to the protests, and so to try to contrast, the current Iranian government or regime, as we want to call it. And this is a way, of course, in which they can achieve the same result without confronting directly on a military point of view. And the other thing that might suggest this kind of choice is that when Iran, or at least Iranian proxies, attacked the oil facilities of Saudi Arabia, there wasn't a very huge consequences. I mean, Saudi Arabia didn't, make a huge attack, or there weren't the, how can I say, big repercussion on Iran because of this attack. So this is a very, I think, specific choice of the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have another very important question from Mark. So this question is Iran's relation with its proxies sustainable, especially in Lebanon? and Iraq, where the economic situation is fragile and political structure is unstable. So you please, Eva, first you please respond, and then I'll ask Debbie.
The relation is very fragile, of course. On one hand, we can say, okay, Iran has been under sanction, I think, 42 years, more or less, and it is incredible what they have achieved, although the sanctions and economic problems. So the relation is very strong, and actually also the US administration admitted that the situation, for example, in Yemen is gone very far, that they have difficulties right now to manage the Houthi problems. So this is a proof of the fact that this strategy was very successful. On the other side, of course, if we will see a regime change inside of Iran, we cannot predict how the situation might evolve. I do not think personally that this will change the military situation of Iran and the relation with its proxies. I think there is a risk that the current government might be substituted by a military one, something like we see in Egypt. So I think that this kind of asset will proceed in the following months. And I think it might also worsen it in the aftermath of the Ukrainian conflict with a new asset, because we saw this alliance with Russia that clearly worsened the position, the Iranian position, at least from the Western world point of view.
Debbie, please.
Yeah, I think the hard economic conditions and political situation in both Lebanon and Iraq makes it even easier for Iran to have influence and to control these groups and to really boost its influence. Because, for example, in Lebanon, they are in a terrible economic situation. And many times it's Iran through Hezbollah who provides people with gas, if they need it, with food, and with many things that the population needs. So it's let's say the most complicated that the situation is in a country is the easiest for Iran to address the people's needs because they are more basic. So on the one hand, the fact that these countries are in a really bad situation is good for the Iranian influence that they want to achieve. And on the other hand, we have to look, if you ask if the relations are sustainable, these relations cost a lot of money. As we saw, for example, the State Department of the United States estimates that Iran sends Hezbollah $700 million every year, which is a lot of money. And maybe the point that would make it unsustainable is the economic situation in Iran itself, because first of all, it is very heavily sanctioned. Second, during the COVID pandemic, Iran was hit very hard in two fronts: in the front of in the biological front, if we can call it like that, with the pandemic, a lot of lives were lost in Iran, and the country got really complicated in this internal situation. And the other front was that during the COVID pandemic, the prices of oil really, really dropped, and this is the main product that Iran can export. So, and it cannot export it to everyone because of the sanctions. So Iran is in a really complicated situation. Now its political situation is complicated with the protests. Iran is going also through a water crisis, and Iran is going through a lot of things that could make these relations with its proxies unsustainable. But on the other hand, we have seen Iran maintaining these relations even during, for example, the Iran-Iraq war, which was a war that really hit both of the countries involved, and Iran kept the relations going. So logically seeing it, it's not very sustainable, but somehow it keeps going. The relations keep going.
Yeah, I think what Debbie just said is very good example. The fact that the price of oil rise in Iran just few days after in Syria started a very huge fuel crisis. because Iran was not able anymore to give the cheap fuel to Syria. So they are, you know, very heavily connected, and this is a positive thing when it comes to the proxy strategies, but this might also be a negative aspect from other point of view.
Very important point you have raised. So I have another interesting question. That question is from Amara Zahir, who is intern at Institute. She is asking what Iran has achieved so far in the region through these proxies, and how these proxies added to Iran's power in the region. This question is from Boltuc, from you.
Okay, okay, for me. They have achieved quite a lot, as I told before. I mean, it was unexpected. As I already mentioned, the US administration admitted that even the US underestimated what Iran could do in the region. They achieved really a lot in Yemen. As I told, Saudi Arabia and the US have some difficulties to deal with the Houthis, and they find themselves in a situation where they have difficulties to settle this dispute. And of course, we saw how much power Proxies gain, Hezbollah gain in Lebanon. We saw the situation in Syria. If you want to enter Syria right now, you have to enter contacting Hezbollah. This is a matter of fact, because they are ensuring, let me say this, the security right now of who wants to travel in Syria. They have really achieved a lot of power and influence in the region. Of course, this has also a very, very negative aspect. This destabilize the Middle East, and it create a very huge friction with Arab countries, which are Sunni, with the majority of Sunni Muslim. And this is not only, there are different levels of the confrontation. It's a religious confrontation, which is very eradicated in history. There is a confrontation of influence, of economic interest, of course, also of trade, of who should control the Strait of Hormuz, for example, who should, you know, control very important corridors and very strategic territories. And this is not only the involvement of Iran, Saudi Arabia, but also of foreign actors. For example, in Iraqi Kurdistan, we saw the interest of Turkey. We have, as I mentioned, the United States. We have also European actors. Recently, there have been a crisis in the northern part of Iraq because Europe was looking for oil and gas, as in the aftermath of the Ukrainian crisis, we are facing a huge gas crisis. So the balance is very fragile. But I think in the situation in which Iran was, with a very bad economy, under sanction, isolated from many countries, they have really achieved a lot in terms of influence in the region. The question is right now if the current government will achieve to maintain the power inside the country.
Thank you very much. Debbie, would you like to respond, or shall I just give floor to another one?
I can add something small, because everything Silvia said is very true. What I would like to add is that these proxy groups are really a very efficient tool of foreign policy for Iran, because they allow Iran to act and to address its problems and its threats, and or to confront its enemies without Iran being directly accountable, which is a very efficient tool and a very important thing to have for a country that is already very, let's say, unpopular in the international arena. So this is a very important tool for the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, and actually, if I may add something, also from the military point of view, Iran, let me say this, gave also a lesson to our part of to the Western part of the world, as recently Europe and the US are are concentrated in also, producing drones and using drones in wars. And this is something quite new for us. Many times I read on the media agency that the first time we saw the effectiveness of the drones was in the Nagorno-Karabakh war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but actually it is not true. We start to attention this kind of weapons after Iran employs them in the Middle East, because they are quite cheap. They are very, it is easy to deliver. They can be also, you can have only the component, and compose them on the site, and they are very effective. So also the new kind of unconventional warfare, let me use this definition, is something that we learn also from the Iranian proxies in the Middle East.
Thank you very much. It was really an interesting question and answer session. Now I give floor to the President of the Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador Nadeem Riyad. Sir, floor is yours.
Thank you, Imran. I would like to thank both the speakers. It was really a pleasure listening to you. I'm particularly impressed by the in-depth research which you have done. And it was really a pleasure looking at the presentation, because a number of things which were in my mind, they became pretty clear. The Institute thanks you, and I can understand that, we have put you through a lot of inconvenience with the time, because given the difference in the time zones, it must be very early on in Italy, and I don't know what time it is in the United States. So thank you very much. From behalf of the Institute, I would like to thank both of you for absolutely very, very detailed, lovely presentations. I thoroughly enjoyed them, and we look forward to working with you in future also. Over and out from my side. Over to you, Imran. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. In that, I would just like to just wind up this session. It was really interesting, and you both, the panelists, have digested with your subjects and was. I think we should have a follow-up session in which we will discuss the future dynamics of Iran's relation with its proxies, maybe late in this month. So I formally thank you, Debbie and Silvia, for joining us. Thank you very much. And one more request I just want to make, that if you please don't mind, we can have your presentation, please. If you just forward it to Faraz Naqvi, maybe you are in contact with him. So you can just email your slides to Mr. Faraz. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, too.
Thanks, Silvia. It was really a pleasure to see you today.